And a very good afternoon to everybody who is going to be watching this amazing broadcast today. I'm Nadine Bowery, Executive and Leadership Coach and Workplace Mediator.
I'm Izzy McKellar. I am a third-year European Politics student at King's College London, and I also do some journalism work.
I'm Ruchika Sharma. I'm a third-year German and Spanish student at King's College London, and I'm currently meant to be on my year abroad, but I am in Bolton, enjoying it.
I'm Asya Iftikhar. I'm a final year UCL Classics student and student journalist and activist.
Hi, I'm Jenny Ling. I'm a leadership development consultant specialising in education.
Okay, Jan?
Yeah, you forget. It's a bit like University Challenge.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah. No, hi, I'm Jan Daines. I'm a freelance education consultant based in the UK, doing some school and leadership support. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a very for us it's a very happy moment, and I have to say that when Jenny and Jan we were preparing today behind the scene, we felt like it was Christmas and we were waiting for our Christmas present. And what I want to say is that there is always a why behind everything we do, and the why we're here today is, I should say, a huge thank you to my one of my daughters. She's at King's and she's in her final year, and I was having a discussion with her about my LinkedIn Live, and I said to her, what could I do to help people like you, your generation, in my LinkedIn Live? And she said to me, well, you could invite students, and have a debate, a discussion. And I have to say that I have totally admired my daughter for navigating this period and this adversity. And she's done that with such elegance and grace and courage, when things have not been very easy. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do what she tells me. She's my, on my advisory board. And she introduced me to Izzy, and then Jenny, Izzy, Jan, we had a discussion, and then it grew to Ruchika and Asya joining us today. So here we are. This is the why we are all together today. So a very warm welcome to you all. And last week, when I posted on LinkedIn that we were going to have this discussion, Geraldine Hutchinson, which is a colleague of us who's worked in the Middle East with us, sent a question. So I'm going to suggest that we start with the question, and I'm going to invite our audience to ask any questions that they want us to talk about. And the first question is, what of the skills and knowledge you've been taught, learned, benefit you the most, and are least useful? And then there's a second question I'll read later.
I think for me, the best skill that I've been taught is communication. In my second year, King's College London ran a pilot scheme called the Civic Leadership Academy, and that was all about obviously leadership, but also building a network, talking to different people from diverse backgrounds, and really cementing yourself, growing some confidence, doing elevator pitches, that kind of thing. And that is definitely the best skill that I've been taught, because I think in my first year especially, and previous to that, I was so scared of people who seemed to have everything together, and I didn't feel confident reaching out, asking for help. And my personal tutor actually told me recently, the most important phrase, I think, being a young person at the moment is, if you don't ask, you don't get. And that is really something that communication brings you, being able to be a bit bold and reach out. But I think that my least useful skill that I've been taught, I'm not necessarily sure if it's a skill, but actually is that kind of sense that you need to have everything together at university, maybe a bit of planning, if that is appropriate. I mean, obviously planning is important to some degree, but I personally have found in these very uncertain times, planning isn't always the most helpful thing, because at the moment, especially with me, I know I could spiral for hours and hours thinking, oh well, if I don't get this job, then this will happen or this will happen. And really, sometimes it's important to go with the flow. Sometimes it's important to see what connections take you where, and see where your passions lie. And sometimes spontaneous opportunities just pop up, and I personally quite like leaving myself open to them.
I'd have to agree. I think that possibly the least useful kind of skill that I have acquired is the kind of need to have everything planned out, have everything structured, and be like, right, this is what the next 3 years will look like. I think, especially at the end of second year in about March, all that kind of flew out the window. One of the things that I have found that the actual pandemic itself has taught me is resilience, and that comes from a point of self-assurance, where everything will be fine if you trust kind of your own skills and your abilities to problem solve. And I think it's really been tested over the past couple of months of having to change, direction in the plans and everything. I was actually meant to be in Chile in July for my year abroad. That didn't happen. So kind of finding other ways to get that education, get that knowledge that I'll need to get into my final year and graduate with a degree in kind of the grades that I want. The grades that I want. You just need to keep pushing through it and just keep. It sounds really cheesy, but just keep going.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that sort of my most useful and least useful skill come hand in hand, because sort of in the vein of not having everything planned out, I think especially when you leave the house and like go to university and start the next stage of your life, there's a lot of competitiveness drilled into you that everybody is your enemy, not enemy, that's a strong word, but everybody is almost in competition with you to get the same jobs, and there's not enough space for everyone, so you need to find a way to stand out. And there are ways for you to stand out that don't include dragging people down or like making yourself feel bad by comparing yourself to them. And so the most useful skill that I've learned as a result of this is collaboration has definitely made going through university and being a student, and especially in the past year, far more easier and bearable, and enhanced my life. And when I like sort of took the competition aspect out of the connections that I was making, we were all bolstered. So that is definitely the best skill that I've learned, is collaboration with loads of different people from different backgrounds.
I think that's kind of part of our degrees. I know for all of us, we don't have degrees that necessarily lead into a clear pathway. I do politics, Ruch does languages, and Asia does classics. And so it's all about those transferable skills, I think, when it comes to our university experience. And sometimes, I talk with my friends and I'm kind of saying, it feels like at the moment, I'm not doing a degree in politics. It feels like I'm doing a degree in resilience. And keeping going and pushing through, because I've probably learned more lessons about myself and about how to get through difficult situations than I have necessarily about politics. And that's not for lack of trying, it's just the situation that has happened in the past few years. And I think that's also common for a lot of people who are going through university. Of a lot of difficult times happen to coincide with the university years, I think. When you're, ages 18 to 21 or 22, that is always going to be an interesting time for moving out of the house. You're discovering more about yourself. And then obviously when you throw COVID into the mix with us, I think a lot of people are feeling at the moment that we're doing a degree in growth and in perseverance more than anything.
Definitely.
I totally agree, especially I think beyond COVID, university in general, a lot of people, whilst the degree subject you're doing itself is important, and obviously you're doing it for a reason, the things outside and the wider experience of university I found really, really valuable, like societies, talking to people, sort of living on your own, sorting out financially, rent, paying fees, and that aspect of independence. They all come hand in hand with like going to university or just generally going on to the next stage of your life outside of school. And those are the biggest learning curves that you don't really expect, but are the most invaluable.
The second part, sorry, Rushika, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay. The second part of the question that Geraldine was asking was, what do you wish you had been taught? Which I think is...
I think it's a difficult one, because in retrospect you can say, well, coming from the viewpoint that we have now in pandemic and stuff, it would have been great to learn about how to deal with, personal issues, how to reach out for help, how to ask for support, how to support friends and other, loved ones. It's quite a broad question, I think.
I think one thing that I really wish that I learned is that to really embrace everything. I think that sometimes, there's a certain element of restraint you feel like you should be showing, not getting too excited or too upset or, too invested in certain things. But one thing that I'm really learning at the moment is I think it's so powerful to get really excited by things, really involved in things. And that can be in every aspect, whether that's, getting really emotionally involved in things, or in terms of university. I know in first year, I was so scared of, putting myself out there and joining a society and trying really hard. And I just wish that somebody quite a few years ago had told me, just absolutely put your all into things. If you're going to spend your time doing something, you may as well do it really well. And I think now, obviously, we have so much time to reflect. That's definitely something that I'm like, I did that and that's cool, but I could have done this. I could have taken all out of it. I could have really reached out to more people during that experience.
Can I ask a question? To what extent? I mean, I think I know the answer, because I think you guys are probably fairly unusual for students. But to what extent do you think others in your position have developed the resilience and the resourcefulness and the positivity that you are showing us and telling us about now?
Well, I'd say, considering, I'd say the people that I'm referencing now are my circle of friends, both at home and at university. I'm very fortunate to be around people who do think similar ways, who like to see the positive side of the situation and do help in supporting other people, bolstering each other. And when we need, like, I think at the beginning of this second lockdown, things got a little bit hard. It was dark a lot. We had a lot of assignments due in, and there was just a myriad of stresses that kind of popped up in front of us. And talking to people my age and my peer mates and stuff, it was really useful. It's really insightful. Oh, is he gone?
She has. Never mind. Keep going.
She'll come back. Yeah.
I found it really insightful, and I found it really inspiring as well, because a lot of people were in similar academic situations to me, wherein we were all doing university online, but everyone was doing different courses. So I have a lot of friends who were in labs and they couldn't get into them, and they had to find their way around that. It's different ways of overcoming a lot of academic stress.
Yeah.
Also, in terms of like stepping back and looking at the wider picture of the student experience during the pandemic, I think that it's exposed, as well as sort of showing a lot of positives, it's exposed lots of different areas of the education system that need work on, and the pandemic has just shone a light on them. And students, the experience I've had of like talking to students and working with them is that we're really taking it in our stride to try and, advocate for making education more accessible and making mental health services more accessible for people who need it, especially at a time like this, and making a more compassionate and understanding institution. And particularly recently, I've seen students canvassing and campaigning and organising in difficult circumstances online with people that they can't see or talk to or meet up with in person. And it's been really inspiring to see that kind of work.
Okay, I think as well, it all comes down to the fact that students are 3D people. And I think that's something that I've really struggled with over the past year, and I know, one of my friends at Oxford has found that the universities sometimes seem to forget that we're 3D people. Yes, we care about our degrees, and yes, we care about our graduate prospects, but also behind the scenes of that, we have complex families going on, we have relationship problems, we have financial problems, we have friendship problems. There's all these other things that are happening behind the scenes as well. And potentially, if we had, the perfect, stable lives, then our university experience probably wouldn't have been disrupted lately. But when it comes to all the different complex elements, which every student has in a varying ratio, we really are being impacted and influenced. And so I think everyone has shown resilience this year. And it's the same for non-students as well. Everyone has shown resilience in their own way, dealing with their own struggles. I doubt that anybody has really not had a challenge recently that something has been influenced.
Can I just ask you a question? Because I think what you've just said is really interesting, Izzy. You're talking about it being impacted, but actually listening to what you're saying over the past 20 minutes or so, I would say it sounds to me like you've been empowered by it. Yes, it's definitely impacted, but I think that what's come through here from all three of you is how powerful you feel about your life. It's not being done to you. You've taken control. And as such, the list of things that you said at the beginning, well, we're all involved in leadership development, across industry and across senior leaders in education. And I mean, that's like, you've got all the components there of a leadership development program for somebody far down the line in their careers. But you're actually now aware of these things, of communication, of embracing spontaneity, finding other ways to get through things. I mean, what you are reflecting isn't the impact, but it's the empowerment. That's not to say that, there are not lots of negatives that have impacted on you. But I would just like to feedback that I think you're coming across as being incredibly empowered and actually will take this opportunity to become the person you'll become as a result of that. Whereas going back to what Izzy was saying, in your first year, you might not have ended up like this in your third year if it hadn't been for the pandemic. So I'm kind of just flipping it.
The time that we've had to reflect, for me at least, has been so important, because obviously reflection is such a powerful tool that everybody use at some point in their life. And because we were locked down for so long as well, and still are, you can reflect on every aspect of yourself, everything that you've done wrong, everything that you've done right, things that you'd like to change. And that sense of, if not now, when, I think has really come through the pandemic. Everyone's been trying to do a bit of self-improvement in whatever way, and a bit of carpe diem as well. We may well, I know, Nadine, that's your email sign off.
That's my signature email.
I think that's been so important for me, because also, yes, there's been, a few meltdowns here and there, but they teach you things and they help you realize what you need to work on. And I know for me, part of that has been, what am I doing after university? There's big question mark in the future. And for me, that's come down to really distilling my values, working out what's important to me, working out what I almost want my purpose to be, what do I want to bring into society and into the world. And I know for me, that's really making people happy. I think that's quite a common one. But I really want to impact individual lives. I don't necessarily care as much about big picture, but as long as I make one person happy in my work every day, I'm very happy with that. And so I think that reflection time, really being able to have this giant puzzle, break it down, look at every individual element, has been really useful for me.
Yeah, I think also sort of coming into that point that for a lot of people in our situation, a lot of our lives have sort of been very certain, and like you almost know the next step, and up until you're about like 20, you're like, okay, I'll do school and then I'll go on to further education or do this apprenticeship or apply for this job, and then I'll do that a graduate scheme or whatever, and then do this and this. And then with the pandemic coming, it's a really big time of uncertainty for a lot of people that they weren't anticipating, and that does make you change gears and reflect on what are the most important things and what are our priorities, and is that knowing exactly what I want to do X, Y, and Z in the next couple of months or next couple of years, or is it understanding what's happening in the moment, how we can make things better right now, because that's all we have the certainty of, which is what the pandemic made clear. So I definitely think that for a lot of students, it's been a case of okay, this has happened, how do we adapt to what's happened and make the best out of this situation?
And do you think that's made you stronger?
I think so. I mean, I don't know where I would be if the pandemic hadn't happened. So I like to think I am stronger for it. Yeah.
But this ability to change quickly to changing circumstances, and the ability to be flexible, and to be able to stick to your path, i.e. getting a degree, whilst all this fluidity is happening around you, surely must make you feel that actually, if I can cope with this, I can, looking forward, I can cope. I've got so much strength and resilience for the rest of my life.
I think for me as well, it's like I was saying, there's an ability to look at your whole picture as a person. And I think that's really strengthened me, because I've been able to look at all of these different elements of my personality that I maybe previously hadn't liked as much or hadn't felt very confident in. Like for me, for example, I have a non-visible disability. I have mild cerebral palsy, and that's something that I never felt comfortable talking about ever. And was something that I was quite ashamed of and things like that. But I think over the pandemic, I've really had a chance to see that and see, okay, well, this is part of me. That's not changing. I have the time to work on my relationship with my disability, work on my relationship with how that actually empowers me in certain ways, what lessons that's taught me. And then when you put on top of that, everything that I've learned from the pandemic, it has been really great, because it's the pandemic itself teaching us flexibility and resilience. But then it's also the things that we've learned during the pandemic about ourselves during reflection. So that's actually a really big strength when you've got both sides of that.
Absolutely.
Jenny?
Yes, can I? Yeah. Yes. Just a couple of comments that I'd like to bring in. One is from Khaled, who just says hello. He's so excited to be here. And Lisa Grace Williams, who is somebody that we know. We've met in the Middle East when Nadine and I presented at conferences in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And she's also been on this forum, and she just says these are some incredibly grounded students. So there's some really positive feedback there for you, ladies.
Thank you very much.
I want to go back to the legacy that you will leave at university, because the three of you will go in the world of work, possibly next year. Okay.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. The plan is going to work. And I want to ask you about your legacy as final year students, because you will go away, but there will be first year going into second year, and students will remain at uni. What legacy do you want to leave behind you?
Asia, I think you're really great for this one, given what you do.
I think that I care about a lot of things, which a lot of students do, and I want to be able to see when the things that maybe I didn't have the opportunity to gain because of the way that my degree is structured, or the opportunities that university offers or doesn't offer. I want to be able to see that is being offered to people when I leave. So, for example, I study classics, and currently I'm working on a project within my department about diversifying the curriculum and making it a safer space for people of colour. And in doing that, we've already seen some changes happening where there's been more open conversation, discussions on how we can change the curriculum, discussions on how to make the degree itself more accessible and do outreach into communities that traditionally don't study the subject. And even though I won't gain from that necessarily because I'm leaving in a couple of months, I want to be able to have a legacy. And many students I know of that, when they've left, they've made that experience more accessible to more people. So that's definitely something I care about.
Yeah, well done.
Well done. Well
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
I think for me, when I came to uni, I was actually quite shocked because I remember watching lots of YouTube videos and talking to lots of older students and then saying university is the best thing ever. It's so fun. You meet so many people. And now that's definitely what I found. But at the beginning, I was, terrified. But also I found my course and, certain elements to be quite cold and quite intimidating, and no one would really speak to each other. And like Ashley was saying earlier, there was a certain element of competitiveness, like I have to be the best. But what I would hope that I've kind of left as my legacy is a bit of a friendly atmosphere. I mean, I'm mentor to some younger students through the civic leadership scheme. And I hope that they realize that university is a friendly place. Nobody needs to compete with each other. And I hope as well, I think and I hope that in the working world it is a bit less competitive in terms of you can all be good at your jobs, it's that phrase of all ships rise in high tides. And I would really hope that younger students now are feeling a bit more welcomed. And I think friendliness as well seems to be a bit of a trickle down system. If one person's friendly to you, then other people are friendly, and so on and so on. So I hope that.
Definitely, I'd like to jump off that. I think leaving a more warming and open community, especially within my department. It's lovely as it is. I have very few complaints, but especially I'd say the student-professor relationships have been quite strained, at least I found in my first year. They did relax a little bit in my second year, but I think that was mainly just for a couple students being very, very vocal and wearing them down, and then finally being like, okay, let's have a conversation. But definitely I'd like to open a couple more channels just for communication of how students are faring, especially within their first couple of semesters in the university.
You talked about mental health at the beginning, and I'm just wondering, if let's imagine for a second that we put you in charge of mental health in your own university. What would you change? What would you bring new? What would you do with that agenda?
I have so much to say on this. I was doing so much. Needs to be done. I don't think I know a single person at university who hasn't faced some really difficult mental health challenges.
Yeah.
Every single one of my friends, everyone that I've met, has at some point gone through quite a difficult mental health time. And that in itself is not okay. What's going wrong there? That needs to be investigated. Is it the pressure that students are facing from the university? Is it, the changing environment if you're living away from home and those tense relationships? But that, first of all, really needs to be addressed in some shape or form to prevent that happening to newer students. But then also, once you're in a mental health crisis at university, the help that you get is, in my opinion, not sufficient. I know that they're doing their best, but when you look at the figures, we give so much money to our universities. They get such a huge amount of fees. And I know lecturers are always protesting because they're not getting enough. We're not getting enough in terms of mental health resources, academic resources, all of that kind of thing. So where's that money going? And that money, if I was in charge of mental health, I would try and make it more than 6 free therapy sessions. I know that's what it is at my university. You're allowed 6 free sessions, and then you that's you done. But if you're in a mental health crisis, there's a lot more to be done than that. There's a lot to unpack. And I think as well, starting those conversations early, week 1 of freshers should have some mental health in it, because it's a scary experience, moving away. I moved from New Zealand, other side of the world. It's scary.
Definitely. And even if I know that funding for mental health possibly might not be coming in the next year or so, But until then, like Izzy said at the beginning of like week 1, first year, just say, look, these are some resources that you can go if you need to call someone. This is a call line. I know that our university has student call lines that you can call other students for, but I think that sometimes, especially when you're in a mental health crisis, you feel like you can't speak to peers about problems that are affecting you. So maybe maybe even outsourcing some sort of therapy or providing just kind of digital resources, it could be very, very beneficial.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what both of you have just said, especially in terms of stepping back and looking at why there's a mental health crisis as opposed to just like funding. And yeah, funding is so important. I think beyond that as well, sort of giving more training for mental health staff and people who are working on campuses, and personal tutors who may be first point of contact for a lot of students who are going through these problems, is sort of acknowledging what the issues are that individual student is going through in terms of like privilege and structures at the university, because there will be people that there is such a variety at university of people who are struggling financially, people who might be struggling with issues in terms of sexism, racism, all these things. And I just don't think there's enough talk or training about that. And it often makes people a bit uncomfortable to like look and say there's something wrong with how we're approaching students and who we're helping and how we're helping them, that puts off a lot of students from even reaching out for mental health help. So I think that that's definitely something I put funding towards, making, training that's more aware of people's individual circumstances and privileges and issues.
I think something as well that could be incredibly valuable is some training or workshops on alcohol and substance abuse at university, because those two things have a great impact on mental health. Especially, I know alcoholism at university is, I don't think I've ever had to talk about that. And if you're in a society, a sports team, you're going to sports night every week, or you feel that you need to go out to make friends, and the easiest way to do that is go to the pub, have a pint. It can lead into a really detrimental spiral, especially you bring social anxiety into that, and also alcohol is a depressant too. And substance abuse equally, it can be quite a social peer pressure kind of environment to be cool, fit in with your flatmates or whatever. So I think that also definitely has a tie into mental health and definitely needs to be addressed.
Can I just come in with Charlie?
Yeah,
we've had a comment from Charlie Potter, and I think this was relating to Izzy, what you were saying about the first year and being more supportive and more friendly. She just says, I couldn't agree more, Izzy. I felt exactly the same way at university, and it's so important to have that friendly atmosphere, particularly in the first year.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey,
Sorry,
Charlie, nice to see you there. Charlie's my niece, actually. Thanks for joining, Charlie. I just wanted to pick up, Izzy, on something you said, because I'm kind of really shocked about that. I mean, I started teaching in 1984, and certainly latterly in the last 10-15 years of my teaching career, we used to ensure that as youngsters came into the sixth form, big sixth form, and a new mix of youngsters coming in. Okay, they're coming in at 16, 17, not at 18, but even so, the new mix of people. And what we used to do was make sure that we gave them some, you called it training, with regard to the things that you're now going to come into contact with, because you're in a much looser, freer environment with other people coming in who you haven't met, who maybe have different values to what you've learned. And are you saying that simply doesn't exist when you then go on from school to university?
Yeah, in my experience, definitely. I had those talks at my sixth form. They were brilliant. Thankfully, those lessons have stuck with me. However, at university, nothing of the sort.
I find that terrifying, actually. That's just a dreadful omission.
And
anyway, let's not dwell on that. But
it's not something new either. I mean, Lisa's just come in again saying really good points, Izzy. Even back in my days, there was a lot of substance abuse at uni, And I could bet it's only gotten worse. And speaking from my experience when I was at uni, which is a lot longer ago than anybody else here, there was certainly a lot of substance abuse there, but I was never aware of any kind of mental health support. So it's not something that suddenly happened.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that it's actually been increased by the people being stuck in bubbles and not having that normality. So I'm sure that's had a terrible impact on that.
I want to move us on to student activism, because I know that the three of you are very committed, engaged, busy with it. And I think it would be great if you could share with us what you are involved with in terms of activism.
So at King's, I've been involved with Raw News, which is our student publication. And with that, we talk a lot about the uni and wider problems of students. So for example, at the beginning of this academic year, so about September time, I wrote a long form article about how students are being impacted by the lack of internships at the moment. So myself, and I know a lot of other students, had internships that they were going to do in last summer. And you work really hard to get those internships. They take a long time. I had one with the civil service, and that took about 4 or 5 months to get. And then sadly, I was unable to do it because of lockdown 1.0. And I know a lot of other students were in a similar position. So that's kind of something that I've worked on, sharing it around. And then when those get reposted more and more, more people become aware of it. And hopefully as well, it filters up into the larger stratosphere, so they realize the impacts that a lack of internships do have. Because how are we meant to get the work experience we need to put on our CV? How are we meant to stand out in front of other applicants if we are not getting that foot in the door anymore? And again, it kind of goes back to those really strong issues that have always been there in uni of who you know, not what you know. And we do not want to return to that kind of environment where, if your parents happen to own a very well-to-do company, you can just go there. And I'm a bit worried about that going into the future, that people who have been disadvantaged by cancelled internships or fewer graduate jobs are not going to progress as far as those who may have superficially a bit of an advantage. Sarah, you do a lot of student activism as well.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot going, especially, well, I was saying the past couple of years, that's because I've only been a student for the past couple of years. There's been a lot of different causes that students have sort of, I think it shows a lot of resilience that alongside their degree, there have been so many causes that students have been at the forefront of shining a light to, whether that is sort of decolonizing the curriculum, which is what I work most closely with, or making universities more sustainable. At UCL for like the past decade, there's been a big push from sustainability activists to get universities to divest fossil fuels, which eventually happened in 2018 or 2019. And beyond that, sort of looking at new societies and new places where students are being leaders of. There's a new society at UCL called the 93% Club, which is all about students who are from state schools or lower income backgrounds and their experience at university and how we can make that more accessible and better. And there's just, in every aspect of life, there are students who are leading conversations at their universities, like more so than staff and those in senior leadership positions, to really force universities to face how they're structuring their education system. So it's been really, really exciting being involved in that, but also, as is similar with Izzy, because I'm a journalist, talking to people who are doing this work. And it almost comes hand in hand, media and activism, because without the media amplifying your voices and giving you the platforms to show more people the work that you're doing, that has been really, really empowering and inspiring to see so many different causes that people have got behind.
Yeah.
I think these are both amazing, amazing people for doing this. I have to be a little bit embarrassed about this. I have not been too involved in student activism in the universities as such. but I have been looking forward to getting more involved in decolonizing the curriculum, especially in the Spanish part of my degree. Looking more at, there's been a push in the past year to kind of look more at the colonized Latin American countries pre-Spanish and, conquistas. So I look forward to asking for both of your advice in the coming future.
Excellent.
Jenny, do you want to say anything about the questions or any comments that we are getting?
I don't think so. I think we've covered most of them so far. Yep.
Can I go back? Can I go back to the mental health issue, Nadine? Would that be okay?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, this is dear to my heart. I'm a trustee of a charity that provides mental health support for. We would use the term we're holding hope where young people are unable to do that for themselves. That would be our what we would say that we're trying to do. But it's focused very much on schools, and it's focused very much on schools, school-age youngsters and their families. And so the services that are available in each of your instances are they university-run things, or are you signposted, or could you be signposted to a charity like, for example, the one that I'm involved with? So how's that menu offered? Is it very thin because it's one-dimensional?
Yeah, in my experience, KCL, because we're connected to a hospital, I think that benefits us a lot.
Right.
So we get NHS therapists and counsellors, but you get 6 free sessions. That's our university policy. I think it might be the same at most universities.
So standard, yeah.
Yeah. So you get 6 sessions, and then that's kind of you done. They give you resources. So there's a website called Big White Wall, which is a forum which you can post about your mental health and see other people's posts about their mental health. Although I personally am not so sure about that as a tool for mental health, because I know for myself and a lot of other people that I know that's not the most helpful, because comparing difficulties, comparing your mental health to someone else's mental health, I personally wouldn't find very helpful.
No.
So I've never really had any access to charities. The only way that I've had that is there is a girl who's at my uni who has a company called Mind Mapper, and she was part of a King's entrepreneurship scheme for that, and that is a mental health charity, and she connects you to other mental health charities. So through my work there, I have, but I'm not sure how at UCL that's the.
Yeah, at UCL it's a very similar situation where you get the 6 free therapy sessions. I know in my own experience it took like 5 months. I applied for therapy and then it took 5 months to get my first appointment. And I'm lucky that I had a support system and like the privilege of not having so much pressure that like it being delayed, I was able to manage that. But those kind of delays aren't plausible for a lot of people who have clearly applied for a reason.
No.
So I definitely think there's a huge problem with delays of therapy, and that's not necessarily like the direct therapy services fault. It's problems with funding and waiting lists and the volume of students that have applied to it. So I think that possibly, I don't know how much the issue will be fixed by just directly sorting out mental health services. Obviously that's really important and the first step, but genuinely looking and asking why are so many students in a mental health crisis that were on waiting lists for multiple months. Yeah, so I think that that's something that we need to reckon with a lot more.
Okay.
Is there any kind of trigger system then? So you have your 6 sessions, and presumably not everybody will pick up on that. If you're having some kind of mental health crisis, and this will obviously come up within those 6 sessions, does that not trigger some kind of follow-up?
I think it would in that case. They do risk assessment forms. On those risk assessment forms, you disclose, how am I going to look after myself what am I going to do for myself? Who am I going to talk to if I get into a worse situation? And the therapist that you're assigned works through that with you, so you do have a pathway to get to.
Okay.
It needs to be, but I would probably say in that situation, you know, if you've finished your 6 sessions, or if you're unable to access those 6 sessions, I believe most students, and what I myself would do, would be going through Samaritans, or another charity, or NHS, or
Okay.
that kind of crisis helpline, because our universities are under so much pressure with what they've got that I wouldn't feel most comfortable putting that "help me, I need help today" kind of pressure on them. And I also don't know if they would be able to address that necessarily.
So that's
same
maybe
for you.
a next step then that might actually be useful within the universities, if they have got some kind of funding, would be to enable them to access that, enable you as students to access that next step without necessarily having to go somewhere else for it.
Definitely.
So looking ahead, in a few months' time, you will be starting work life with a new job. Do you want to share with us what you are hoping to, where you're hoping to go, and what you're hoping to do? And, you know, is there anything we can do to help you achieve that?
I myself would love to go into journalism or the TV industry. I absolutely adore creative things, communicating, meeting people. And like I said earlier, I really want to have a job that has an impact on bringing people a little bit of joy. So TV to me really stands out in that way, because also you can convey so many different messages through that. You know, you can talk about mental health storylines, you can bring up certain issues, you can invite certain guests on, that kind of thing. So I'm looking at ITV and Channel 4 and BBC for that. But then also journalism, print journalism, I love writing, and again, that's talking to people. So yeah, I'm kind of looking at the main newspapers for that too.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Izzy, you know, as to where you are at the moment with your application. Rushika, what's your plan, roadmap?
So my year is actually, it's a 4-year course, because this is meant to be the year abroad. So I'll be going into my final year and kind of hunkering down and looking at what I want to do. I think for the time being, I'm really, really invested in looking in law. I think it's always interested me, and when I was choosing my degree, I was actually thinking between law and languages, and I was like, I absolutely adore languages. I think if I keep them now and I keep develop them, and I can always go into law later. So that is one of the main pathways that I'm looking into at the moment.
Wow. And you would stay at King's to do that?
I would hope to. I don't think they actually offer a
GDL.
Yeah, a GDL or an LLM. So I'll be looking at, my main university at the moment is BPP that I'm looking for, and I'm thinking about the LLM masters in law.
Wow, it's exciting.
Yeah.
I guess I'll jump in.
Yes.
I'm hoping to become a journalist, particularly working like on the ground investigations and sort of working with communities to shed light on underreported stories. And so I'm hoping that come when I graduate, I'll be able to start work as a reporter, working at one of the main newspapers, maybe like the Times or the Guardian, or if not, also local papers is a great way to gain experience. So really just the media industry is so diverse that I would really be happy like working as a reporter in any aspect of the industry, sort of starting there.
So, you know, coming back to what you were saying, that you've not been able to do, you know, internship, you don't really strike me as having deficiencies at all. I mean, you know, if I was sitting on a panel to appoint you, I'll appoint you. I'd have no problem with that at all, I have to say. But what are you doing at the moment to to get a job? What I mean, is the university helping you? Are they putting on workshops or whatever can be put on to help you get a job?
So for me, I found the Bright Network a really useful resource. They particularly work with underrepresented groups, but also they do workshops for absolutely everyone. And they do workshops on, how to construct a CV, cover letter, all of that kind of thing. So I found them really invaluable. And then they also sometimes do collaborations with different universities. But for me at the moment, I'm trying to balance, because I've found, at least, I'm sure you've probably found something quite similar as yet, these job applications take forever, hours and hours and hours, and then you've got the interviews and the tests and the assessment centres and all that kind of thing. So for me, I'm trying to balance my workload and those as much as possible.
Very important.
Yeah, I mean, next week I think I've got an assessment centre, which is the final round, but it's from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. And I was given one slot. That was it. If I can't make that, that's unworkable. But also, if I spend my whole day doing that next Wednesday, and then I don't get it, that will be quite devastating, because then I've wasted a whole day I could be spending on my dissertation or something like that.
I think for me at the moment, once again, I'm only looking at insight schemes, back schemes. The application process for them is surprisingly long. I am trying to focus a lot on this is now my German semester, so I'm trying to get my German up to scratch before we start with the German universities. I forgot. Sorry.
What language are you learning, Ruchika?
I'm learning German and Spanish. So I've had my Spanish semester for the first part of this year, and now I'm going to be going to online university with Munich, the University of Munich.
Okay.
That's going to be an experience. I'm very much looking forward to that. From a university point of view, the German department itself has actually hosted a lot of really interesting workshops. Mainly because languages it does not lead into a specific vocation. They've kind of made them very broad, so how you can use your skills in business, in foreign affairs, law even. It's been very interesting to have a lot of speakers and see what my potential pathways could be.
Interesting.
Wow, great.
Can I ask? Sorry, I'm thinking there's been a lot of negative publicity this year about first-year students in terms of what they've had to put up with being shut into halls of residence, and we live quite near the university up here in Newcastle, and there's all these signs up at windows and things. And I'm wondering, if you were to talk to somebody in their sixth form at the moment who was thinking, well, now's not really a very good time to go to uni, perhaps I should just go out and get a job. What would you advise them to do if they had that opportunity to either go to university or make a different decision?
I think I would ask, what is your motivation for going to university? I would say, if it is for personal growth, making connections, those kinds of transferable skills, if you feel like you need a bit more time, a bit more personal growth, go to uni. If you're doing it for the specific degree, perhaps, or to go in a particular vocation, I would maybe say go down the apprenticeship route instead, or internship or work experience or something like that. Because I think virtual teachings, for me at least, are not nearly as engaging. Not being able to go to the library, all of that kind of thing. I'm really struggling to keep up my academic motivation. And I know if I was a first year, I would have to say. But in terms of personal growth, transferable skills, meeting people, I think it's brilliant, and I would still recommend it, because if not now more than ever, you are going to learn a lot of skills at university at the moment.
It's great. That's a great answer. Thanks, Izzy. What about you two? Aisha?
I agree with Izzy in terms of asking what their motivation is, because it really depends on what you want to get out of it. And I think the pandemic has probably made that even more clearer, because you really have to face why am I doing this? Because before it's sort of like the default, oh, I'll go to university, I'll figure it out there, see what happens. But now, you know, you'll be going to university on your laptop in your room and attending hours of lectures, and like the social aspect is diminished naturally. So I think it's sort of what you want to gain out of it and what you think the next step is. If there's something you're really passionate about, if there's like a subject area that you really, really care about, then yeah, go for university. And similarly, as you were saying, you learn a lot of skills at university and it gives you more time to figure out what you want to do. But then if you know what you want to do and you have other options, I think it's sort of the same, just like really facing what you think the best decision for you is and what you want to gain out.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with the two of you more, to be quite honest. I think, in all fairness, all experience is ultimately good experience. If you know what you want to do, brilliant, do it. If that means go to university, don't. If you're on the fence, I really would suggest just focusing on what will kind of be most beneficial for you in the outcome in the long run. I think the other said more than that I could say.
Yeah, I agree in the sense that for a lot of cases, no decision is the wrong decision. You'll gain different things from either way, and you'll never know what would have happened if you took the other route, but you'll be better for it either way.
Charlie's just come in with an interesting comment. It's been interesting. I work in student recruitment, and we haven't actually seen any reduce in application numbers applying to university this year, which is, I think, really surprising. People still want to go despite everything.
Yeah, fascinating.
I don't think I actually think that it doesn't mean that they will go. They might be applying, but in the end, they might not go. It's just they might be doing that.
What's going to be
open. So I wouldn't think that that's necessarily what's going to happen. That there is no drop. I think a lot of people are questioning, spending your whole year in a room. I mean, hopefully by next year we'll be okay.
Yeah, people may be hoping that things will have improved by next September, October.
Yeah.
I think there's a few different elements to that. I think, there's two main schools of thought. Obviously, what you're saying, Nadine, they may just be, checking their bets and possibly not go. But I also think that, people are holding out hope. And if I was an 18-year-old right now, I'd probably be saying, oh, well, can spend 3 years at uni and then the economy will have recovered. By the time I graduate, the graduate market will be fine and then I can do the normal thing or whatever. But then also, I think that a lot of people will have found lockdown really difficult. I know if I had been shut in with my family for 17 and 18, that would have driven me a bit insane. I would have wanted to move away. I would have wanted to go and meet some new people, get a bit of fresh air, get a bit of independence. So I'm sure that's a driving factor as well.
Definitely. I also think there's, I'm not sure how it was for the two of you, but I remember at my sixth form, it was very much you go to university and there isn't really that much of an option otherwise. So university was pushed and pushed and pushed, and we didn't hear that much about apprenticeships. Yeah. So once again, if I was in the position of, if it was me at 17, 18, I think I still would be like, right, I go to university because what else have I got? Mm-hmm. And if there's anyone listening that's thinking that, I really would recommend just looking at your options. Have a little look. No harm in just searching around, seeing if this would appeal to you more. Just, stay flexible. If that's anything the pandemic's taught us.
Yeah, I think Charlie's come back again saying it's very true, but I think they're also thinking about what else can they do? Can they get a job? Can they go traveling? COVID has stopped the accessibility of these normal things. It's kind of coming at you from both sides, isn't it?
Yeah. We have about 2 minutes left. It's been nearly an hour of talking, which is amazing. Do you have any final message each that you want people to hear?
Yeah. I would say my final message to students is that you have a lot more power than you may think, and people may tell you, and like you may be looked down on, but we actually have a lot of thoughts, and we're at a time in our lives when we're learning so many new skills that we can put in place, and that's what universities are teaching us, how to use these skills to make change and make a better world going forward. And so we have so much power to do good and to take these skills forward and make things better for ourselves and future generations, and we shouldn't underestimate that at all.
Definitely. I would probably say something very similar. Know your power, but also at the same time, understand your limits. If there is, remember that we are in a situation that is incredibly unknown. No one knows what to do. That's completely fine. If you need to look after yourself, take that time. We have all the time in the world at the moment. I'd say just make sure that you can keep going. Don't try and exhaust yourself.
I think I would say have a bit of faith. I think that we are incredibly powerful. We are incredibly resilient. And I don't think that anyone really gives himself enough credit. Everyone has such incredible resilience in their life, such incredible positivity, and we're very strong and we can keep going. So I think it's having a bit of faith in yourself, having a bit of faith in other people around you. They want to support you, they want to look after you, and having faith that as a society it's gonna be okay.
And you know what? In a few months' time, you will come back to my LinkedIn Live, and we will talk again. And you will be very successful in your first year at uni and in the world of work. And we will look back, and you will be very proud of what you've achieved. Charlie just said, you are all some seriously inspirational young women. And you truly are. If I was an employer out there, I'd want to know who you are, and I would look at your profile on LinkedIn, and I would seriously get in touch with you to talk to you about prospect of working for them. I think you've been amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's been great talking to you all.
So if people want to get in touch with you, you're all on LinkedIn. Okay. Yeah. So they can contact you and direct message you via LinkedIn. So we shall finish on that message. It's been an absolute privilege to have you,
Thank you,
here.
Ladies.
Thank
really,
you.
Really
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and at the beginning, prior to going live, we said to you the hour is really going to fly by. And it flew by. It flew by. Thank you so much. We, our generation, have a lot to learn from you.
Absolutely.
And I am very grateful for, saying yes to coming on the LinkedIn Live and sharing with us what you've shared with us openly today. It's been amazing. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.